If you're not really into collecting Japanese video games, then you might not have noticed just how many SD Gundam games there are. No matter how small and obscure the platform is, everyone seems to get a pile of them. So how many SD Gundam games do you think exist? And I'm not counting the expansion pack for the first SD Gundam Gachapon game. I'll put the answer at the end of the video. SD Gundam was the cutified version of the animated War Machines. Despite having a relatively serious plot about the hardships of war, they also sold a lot of toys and model kits. And that's why they had to make cute versions, including small toys that you could get out of those capsule vending machines. And because Bandai was always looking for a way to extract a couple more yen out of children's pockets, they started making versions of these robot figurines redesigned to match a European fantasy setting and a Sengoku-era Japan setting. Those Samurai Gundam toys actually weren't out at the time that this game was released, which meant that SD Gundam Gachapon Senshi 3 was the first time that kids encountered them. The box for this game says, and I quote, "It's most exciting game in the world." And if you can't trust the front of a game box, who can you trust? The first two SD Gundam Gachapon Senshi games were designed by Human Entertainment. Of course, by 1990, Human was busy making all of the money through their absurdly popular Fire Pro Wrestling series, and they weren't working as contract developers anymore. And so the game was handed off to the less capable Game Arts. On the Famicom, they ported Thexter and made Faria, so they didn't have a deep development history on the platform. The SD Gundam Gachapon games are light strategy games with the key mechanic being that you capture locations to acquire resources over time, and then you use those at a capsule machine to buy more units. It's not a especially complicated or deep game here. On your turn, you move all of your units, and then it's your opponent's turn and they do the same. Ending a turn on a resource with a ground unit will capture it, and colliding with an enemy unit will start combat. Combat is where things take a bit of a turn. In the previous two games, the combat was action-based, but in this game, it plays out like a turn-based RPG. You select between ranged attack, close-up attack, defend, or run away. You can see your chance to hit and how many hit points your opponents have, and all of the units come in groups of 5. If you've got a stronger unit, it will be the one strong unit in that group, and they'll just have a bunch of weak throwaway guys with them. If you choose to run up an attack, you can attack another time if the opponent gets destroyed by this. But if you fail to defeat the enemy, then they can attack you back. Another new addition to the combats is that units get experience points and level up. Levels seem to mainly affect how likely it is you are to hit the enemy. Units recover health over time, including coming back from the dead. So if you've heavily damaged an enemy unit, you'll want to keep up the pressure on them, otherwise they'll be back to full strength. Besides selecting things and choosing where you want to move them to with the A button, the B button will bring up a list of units and rotate you to anyone who hasn't moved, and pressing Start or Select will bring up a menu where you can choose to end your current turn where you are, or save your game. There's one battery save slot here, and they don't prompt you to overwrite it, so somebody was bound to have lost their game at some point. The game offers you 40 scenarios, divided equally among 4 different categories. You have Land Wars, which are the most straightforward of them. The second set of scenarios move the action to space, and here you'll have carriers as units. You can put your units on them, and they can launch units after they move. They also have an easier time transitioning through the map boundaries between colony areas and space areas, so using the carriers can really extend your range. In the Night Gundam scenarios, units typically only have one weapon rather than 2, and each side gets a main unit that's your goal to defeat, rather than having to capture the headquarters of the other team, which is your goal in other modes. There's also special giant units in the Night mode, who act all on their own. Finally, in the Sengoku Gundam, the big difference in these scenarios is that there's no production. What both sides have at the start is everything they've got for the fight. You also have the ability to customize your gameplay quite a bit. You can choose to restrict the number of units you can move each turn, give one side or the other some extra starting cash, or choose to not allow a team to produce anything. While you can choose what side to play in the sci-fi battles, you're restricted when it comes to the other scenarios. On top of that, the red side tends to be significantly stronger than the blue side, but the player is the blue side by default, so you'll probably want to do some tweaking of the settings if you're going to play against another person. In Japan, this seems to be regarded as one of the lesser entries in the series. It just doesn't seem to be the popular choice to go back to. I actually kind of like the SD Gundam Gachapon games. I won't say that they're fantastic, but I like them as light strategy games. I can sit down, play a scenario, and then just be done for a while. And 3 is probably the one I'm least likely to go back to. If I want the action, I'll play 2. If I want the strategy, I'll play 5. This one just feels kind of redundant with so many other SD Gundam games.